Welcome back to the Cigar Box guitar build. This is part number 4. Our goal for this episode is to get the neck shaped and the finish applied. If we can check off a couple other items, that's going to be a bonus. But our main focus for this episode is to carve the neck, get the finish applied, and get the neck attached to the body. I'm Jeff, you're watching Homebuilt Workshop. Make sure you stick around. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to this episode of Homebuilt Workshop. I hope all of you are doing awesome. We are picking up with part number 4 of the Cigar Box guitar build. It is high time we get the neck shaped. Just a quick recap. In the previous 3 episodes, we've got the neck all glued up. We've got it roughly shaped. We've got frets in, the fretboard's on. The box is pretty well complete. We've installed some gold accents to tie everything together with the stuff that's on the box. We're at the point where we're now ready to shape the neck. To do this, we're going to need an important item. This is my neck carving buck. It's a tool that I feel is almost critical for carving a neck. If you try to carve a neck while it's flat on a workbench, you just don't have any room to work. Imagine trying to shape and carve away here. You got no room, so you need some sort of a tool, a jig like this, to hold the neck up off the workbench. That's really all it's for. This has got some different holes drilled in places to accommodate clamps. That way you have lots of options for securing your neck. On mine, I have this little removable block and I can place this at either end. And the goal for this little block, it's just a spacer. I do a lot of fender style necks, so that helps support the headstock so that when I clamp it in place, I'm not bending it in any weird ways, because that would absolutely throw off the shape as I'm carving away. Something like this is super easy to make. It doesn't have to be fancy. I've got mine covered with some leather, but just something on there to kind of protect the frets or your fretboard, however you choose to do this. Really easy to make and critical for the process that we are about to tackle. We'll just make a little bit of space here. And our first step really is to get this secured to the bench. Pretty easy to do. A couple of clamps. I like to have it on sort of a, inverted T. That way I've got lots of options for clamping this down. I can use the holes that are drilled in the side, or if that's not an option, then I can clamp it down just like that, using the base. Now we can just set our neck in place. I'm starting with my little spacer here. You'll probably notice throughout this process that I'll be moving it back and forth depending on what I need to access. Ideally, I would like to be able to access this free and clear on both sides. So that would mean a freestanding base for this would be awesome. I just don't have room for that. So sometimes to accommodate different options, I'll switch it back and forth. But for right now, we're going to start with it like this. Now we can clamp it down at either end. You see I have holes here, which allows me to kind of keep the clamp out of the way while we start carving. We'll just clamp this neck at either end. One clamp on the headstock with my little spacer. Now on a normal electric guitar neck, I would clamp right here and clamp down on the heel. But since this is longer, not a problem, because I have lots of holes drilled at different locations on the side of this, which allows me to put the clamps in. Now our neck is secured. One other important step before I start carving is to know exactly where my transitions are at the heel as well as the headstock. So I want to try to sketch those in now. I just use a pencil to kind of give me a guideline as to how I want everything to look. I'll be able to fine tune this a little bit later, but I need to know right now where to stay away with the rasp. I want to make sure that I'm centered when I do this transition here. Same thing down here at my stacked heel area. Just a little pencil mark. Sketch that in sort of how we want this to look. Not really any hard and fast rule, just make it look the way you want it to look. Rough center line. Not really necessary because that's going to get carved away anyway, but it gives me a starting point so I know exactly where I'm working. And now I believe we have all of the markings and we're ready to start removing some material. To do most of this heavy lifting, the heavy carving, I'm going to use my trusty Shinto saw rasp. These things work amazing. They remove an incredible amount of material and they're really inexpensive for as well as they work. I've used spoke shaves, rasps, all kinds of other things. I found this to be my favorite. It's my go-to to get started. And we'll end up using some of those other tools once we remove the majority of the material with this Shinto rasp. This thing works great. I highly recommend if you're looking for a tool to start carving a guitar neck, or really anything for that matter, check out these things. It's not sponsored or anything, but these things work awesome. I want to interrupt this Cigar Box guitar building video right here to let you know of a new feature that YouTube recently rolled out. That feature is called Hype. And what the heck is Hype? Hype is a great free way to show your support to the channel and help spread the word so that it can be seen by others. The way Hype works is for the first 7 days only after a new upload, just like this video, you can scroll down on your mobile device and in the comments section, there's 3 little dots over in the side. Again, this is only for the first 7 days. If you swipe that to the left, it'll bring up the Hype function. It's totally free. You can hype the video, which helps spread it out to others so others can check it out just like you're doing. Did I mention that Hype is free? So do it right now. Even if you are on a desktop, bring up your mobile device. Hype the video on there. It's a great way to show your support for the channel and help spread the word of Home Built Workshop. Again, it's only available for the first 7 days after a new release. So if you're trying to find it on an older video, that's why it's not going to show up. It's only on newer videos. So do it right now if you're watching this in the early days. Thanks a lot for your support. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the hypes, the subscriptions, the comments, all that sort of thing. Let's get back to this build. If ever there was a time to put on some headphones, crank up your favorite music, now's the time. Let's do this. Let's shape this neck. As I'm starting out, I'm sort of just knocking off these corners. The way I kind of approach this most of the time is by taking off the corners and then sort of creating maybe another hexagon type shape by just knocking off more corners and more corners. Eventually you end up with a fairly round shape that's pretty easy to smooth out. So I'm just going to continue knocking off corners, creating more facets on the neck, and once we get it fairly rounded, very similar to a guitar neck shape, then I'll come in here at about the 12th fret and we'll flatten off a spot, take some measurements here to get our thickness at both the 12th and the 1st fret, and then I'll be able to come in right along the top and make sure I have that nice taper in there. The whole time I'm carving, especially with a very coarse file, I'm trying to stay away from my pencil marks at the headstock and the heel transition. If I go too far, it's going to be a little tricky to kind of smooth that out. So I want to make sure I stay well away from those pencil marks. My trusty Shinto and I have been busy for quite a little bit now, and I've got this neck down to where it's faceted, and my next step is going to be to start working down the thickness. But before we do that, I want to bring you in really close and kind of show you the facets. Sometimes it can be hard to explain stuff like that, and maybe if I can show it to you, maybe it'll make a little bit more sense. So hopefully you can sort of see what's going on here. I'm going to try to use some chalk maybe to accentuate some of the lines here. Right now I have 3 flats on a side. Well, that looks like it just made it worse, but let's see here. There you go. Maybe you can see that now. I've got a flat here. This is not the side of the neck. I have filed a very flat side here that's just at a slight angle. Starts to knock that material off from these edges. And in my experience, that's where a neck starts to really get comfortable. You start removing some of that from the sides. Then I've got this flat right here, which is sort of a 45-degree angle to what was the top. Then I have this flat here, which is not flat across. It's also at a shallow angle. So I've got 1, 2, 3 sides. Meanwhile, my center line that I drew initially is still there. I've tried to file as close as I can to that center line without touching the center line. By leaving the center line at this step, at least I know that I've filed everything fairly even. I haven't gone too far to one side or the other. Now, that center line is going to be a guideline for the next steps when I go in and file a flat. Now I'm ready to start working down the thickness of the neck. I need to take some measurements at the 1st fret as well as the 12th fret, and then I can file a flat in the top until we get down to the thickness that I want to be. From there, really, it's just a matter of connecting the dots, so to speak, and smoothing everything out. Let's measure this thing. We're going to come in here with our trusty calipers. And at the moment, we should be right at about 1 inch because I haven't removed that center line. And that is in fact the case. So I know both of these are still going to be 1 inch thickness because our piece of maple was 3/4 of an inch. We've got a 1/4 inch fretboard. We haven't removed the center line yet, so our total thickness is still 1 inch. So we're going to come in here. File that flat across. And here at the 12th fret, I try not to file that flat all at once because I have found that if you take this down, it makes a really severe ridge here, which sounds like you just file it out, which actually is the case, but when it creates such a hard, deep step there, it can be really hard to remove. So I kind of like to go in increments, if that makes sense, rather than all at once. So we'll file a flat on both ends, then we'll start to smooth that out, then I'll come back, we'll file another flat, rather than going all at once. I've seen a lot of people go all at once here at this step, and there's nothing wrong with it. I've just found that it's kind of tricky to remove the divots that you create by removing that much material. So I don't know, it's just a personal preference of mine. I would rather just go a little at a time. Seems to be easier to keep things smooth. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm really saying that if you file all of it away, you're creating a slot almost where you filed, and it just can be tricky to get that out of there. So I like to go a little bit at a time, work it down slowly till I get to the thickness that I want. Now I'm filing those flats down, adjusting the thickness at the 1st and the 12th fret. My next step is going to be to basically connect the dots and remove the material in between these flats. Since I'm removing the center line, I'm going to chalk this up now. That way I can sort of monitor my progress a little better. I'm also at the point where I want to reposition these clamps, and I want to start knocking some of the material off of this stacked heel. We need to start working that in to the rest of the shape. I'm going to continue working on this, slowly working my thickness down, but trying to maintain those facets as well until we get the thickness where we want it. Then we can move on to some sandpaper and some other files and rasps. After a bit of time going back and forth with the Shinto, fine-tuning the thickness at the 1st and the 12th fret, I've got the taper on my neck about where I want it. Everything's starting to feel pretty good, and now it's time to switch to a little bit finer file, and I can start removing those facets and work towards rounding over the neck. For the areas of the heel and headstock transition, I found that a coarse, round file works pretty well for getting in there and fine-tuning those transition areas. These can be pretty tricky to get into, so it does make a difference the tool that you decide to use. For me, like I said, a coarse, round file works really well. Well, up until now, we've done all of our shaping with different grits of files and rasps. And at the moment, I think the neck is feeling pretty good. Of course, right now, we've got a ton of very coarse file marks in there. But with the shape, I think pretty darn close. I think we can move on to some sandpaper and begin smoothing this out and getting this thing one step closer to applying some finish. We do have a little bit of final refining to do of the shape. I can feel a couple of areas where I feel like I want the corners just a little more rounded. Now, when it comes to shaping the neck, there's really, as far as I'm concerned, not a hard and fast rule. This is how you have to shape it. This is how it needs to be done. Just make it comfortable. If it feels good to you, then the shape is fine. I'm going to begin the sanding process, starting out with some long strips that I've cut from some old sanding belts. The sandpaper is still good, but I've got a whole bunch of large sanding belts that the adhesive has gone bad that connects them together. So rather than just throw them away, I just cut them up and use them in strips. You can buy rolls of sort of an emery cloth type paper, and they work really good for this next step because we're going to basically sand like this. And while we're sanding across the grain, this method does a great job at smoothing out any irregularities. Once we're done with this step, we're going to go with the grain and finish sanding up through probably 320, maybe 400 grit until everything is nice and smooth. We're going to use probably a gazillion different kinds of sanding blocks, rounded pieces, little flat strips, anything you need to get into the different contours and shapes. We'll wrap sandpaper around all kinds of different things. Just get creative. Use what you have around, and anything that you can use as a sanding block is going to work fine. This is probably the step that we're going to spend the most time on. You guys all know how much I enjoy sanding. You just can't skip it. If you do, you're going to have less than stellar results. So while it's not fun, unfortunately, you got to keep at it. Don't skip a grit. Go one grit, work up through 120, 220, 320. I'm probably going to go to 400. It's going to be nice and smooth. Really, you got to spend the time here. Earlier I mentioned how if you sand the notch at your 1st or the 12th fret, sometimes that notch is really hard to get out of there. And even this time around, I tried to be very careful with that notch. I've got one spot right here that's just being stubborn, and it just so happens to be the spot where I filed that notch. So I need to do a little bit more work right here in this area to smooth that out. I'll put some pencil marks in there. The lead from the pencil kind of fills in the file marks and makes it really easy to see the low spots. That way, as I'm sanding, I can tell if I need to do some more work right there.
After that first round of sanding to the main portion of the neck, I had to do a little bit more cleanup with the small round rasp just to fine tune a little bit of the transition. And then we just grab a whole bunch of sanding blocks and begin the long process of sanding.
Well, that finishes up the round of 220. One thing that I found that's really important at this step is in between each grit and during the entire process, really, I'll take the piece and I'll hold it up against a light. I've got a light that's right about eye level there, and if I hold the neck up to that light and so the light is kind of raking across the piece, it really helps to highlight any scratches and imperfections in there. Just helps identify certain areas that you might need to do some more sanding on. Well, I feel like I've been sanding all day. Well, actually, because I have. But I believe now we've got this thing sanded. I decided to stop at 320. I was getting ready to go up to 400, but upon further inspection, I think 320 is fine. This is looking really nice, and I think we're ready to move on after I do a little bit of cleanup. Every time I turn that thing off, it sounds like, I don't know, a dying goose or something. I'm surprised it hasn't died completely yet. It's been doing that for years. One of these days, though, I'm going to need a new shop vac. I'm going to give this neck a quick wipe down just to remove any dust in preparation for applying the finish. My own personal preference for a finish on a guitar neck is something that's non-film building. Basically, a film building finish is something like a lacquer, where you would apply several coats to build up the desired finish. It basically is a film on top of the wood. I like to be able to feel the wood, so my preference is some sort of an oil finish. The finish I'm going to use this time around is this guitar finishing oil. This is a product made by Crimson Guitars, not sponsored or anything, but this is one of my default finishes for a guitar neck. It's not my favorite for bodies, although I have used it before and it works fine, but I really like it for guitar necks, and that's what we're going to use for this particular build. Are you supposed to shake well before using? I don't know. I can't read it. The words are too small. We're going to shake well before using anyway. Here's a little insider tip. If you use a finish like this in a really small bottle, take a block of wood, drill a hole in it so that your finish can sit in there. Even if it's not 100% snug, it keeps it from tipping over and spilling all over the place. Ask me how I know that's a good idea. This finish is really easy to apply. I'm just going to use a paper towel. It's one thing I like. You don't have to get all fancy with a bunch of spray gear and all that. Simple, good quality paper towel works great. I'm going to wipe a light coat of this finish on the entire neck, including the fretboard. Since this is walnut and not something oily like a rosewood, I want to coat a finish on there as well. So really makes it pretty simple. We're just going to cover the entire thing. Ooh, that spalted maple heel cap looks super cool. Yeah, this finish is so easy to apply. And it feels great when you're playing too. Once we have a coat applied, then we just need to let it sit for a few minutes. Doesn't take all that long for this finish to start getting tacky, then we're going to go back with a clean paper towel and sort of polish off the excess. I'd say wipe off the excess, but I found more that you kind of have to get after it and sort of polish off the excess. I don't know if that's because I'm doing something wrong, but that's how I do it. Once I have this excess wiped off, I'm going to set this aside for a couple of hours to dry. And after 2 or 3 hours, I'm going to come back and apply another coat and repeat that exact same process until I have, I don't know, 3 or 4 coats or so on there. You can keep going with this particular finish and build up a pretty decent gloss finish. However, that's not what I'm going for. I want to try to just keep this sort of a matte finish. I don't want to build up really any layers on here. So I'm going to set this aside, repeat this process a few more times, and we'll come back once I have several coats applied. After applying 3 coats of that finish, letting it dry overnight, this is dry to the touch, still has a little bit of a smell to it. It's going to need a little bit more time to finish off gassing, but it's dry to the touch and we can continue and get this installed inside the box for what is hopefully the last time. There we go. The neck is installed in the box. And actually, I think I will probably have to remove this at least once more. Once it comes time to run the wiring, I'm going to end up having to drill a hole for the pickup wire. Probably going to have to pull that back out. So I don't think that'll be the last time. But it's going to be mighty close because in this episode, we got the neck shaped, carved, sanded, finished, and now it's attached to the box. And this is where we're going to stop for this episode, which is part 4 of building this cigar box guitar. Stay tuned for the next episode where we're going to focus on getting things assembled, possibly getting it wired. I'm not really sure. You're going to have to make sure you're subscribed to the channel and you stay tuned for part number 5 because that's what we're going to start on right after this. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know down in the comments your thoughts on this build and also leave any questions. I want to answer any questions that any of you have on this build. Doesn't have to be about something in this episode, but from any portion of this build. Leave it down below. Thanks a lot for watching. I'm Jeff. You're watching Home Built Workshop. We'll see you next time. Aha! Man, that just feels so nice. Nice and smooth. Coming along. I like it. I like it. Will it stand? I don't know if it'll stand. Maybe not with that towel. Ah, look at that.